Welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast, where Sean, Ellis, and Ethan Garr interview leaders from the world's fastest-growing companies to get to the heart of what's really driving their growth. And now, here are your hosts, Sean Ellis and Ethan Garr.
All right, in this week's episode of the Breakout Growth Podcast, Ethan Garr and I chat with Gina Gotthilf, who is the co-founder and CMO of Outsmart, a new startup looking to disrupt the traditional college model. So if you were a VC making a big bet on a startup who is looking to shake up higher education, you probably couldn't find a better team to bank on. Gina and her two co-founders are veterans of Duolingo, arguably the most significant education innovator in recent decades. So just a few weeks ago, Outsmart announced a $13 million seed round led by Khosla Ventures. $13 million. That's a big bet. So, Ethan, what stood out for you?
A $13 million investment in a company that has no customers and barely has any code yet. That definitely stands out.
Sure.
But let's face it, with Duolingo's success, this gamified education space is just on fire. And like you said, this is a team you would bet on. So, I mean, Gina's amazing, which you and I have known for years since we both saw her speak at one of your Growth Hackers conferences. But it's more than that. You know, she knows that no matter what you've done in the past, you are not entitled to product market fit. That's just not how it works, right? And she knows this is going to take loads of hard work and innovation.
Yeah, she embodies the word grit. If you looked at her background, maybe you wouldn't think so. You know, a neuroscience degree, that was a surprise when she mentioned that. And yeah. I know she's been running a Latin American VC firm, but man, when you talk to her, you just know she's got so much grit. She's someone who is able to dive in and figure stuff out. She understands what it takes to build from the ground up. Just has that never surrender attitude.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why I love talking to her about working with or without resource limitations, which was a big part of this conversation and just an awesome discussion. You know, she's worked with no budget and no team in some of the things she's done. And she's worked with practically limitless resources in other things she's done. The latter always sounds amazing, but you know, she explains that she'd almost prefer not to have all the money and people to throw at things. And I think, you know, she sees that as a forcing function of, you know, the limitations force you to make the right decisions and good decisions. And that's where that scrappiness really counts.
Yeah, so true. And while they are well capitalized in their startup, I think her approach is all about embracing and leading with that scarcity mindset. So our listeners are going to love the reasons for her wanting to become an influencer.
Yeah,
that does not sound like someone who's kind of thinking from a scarcity mindset. It sounds like more like an ego-driven approach, but when you get into the reasons, you realize it is something from a really gritty perspective that she's approaching that. And so, yeah, super cool when she mentioned that.
Yeah, it was different and not what I expected, and just, yeah, really interesting. So yeah, this is a super fun conversation, and it even features some comedy relief thanks to my idiocy, and probably one of my favorite episodes we've ever done, Sean.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a great episode, and anyone who watches the video is going to see I was biting my tongue from to prevent it from just laughing out loud. I think Gina was doing the same thing, but she handled it well, put it right on the table with Ethan and his slip of the tongue there. So this is a funny one, even if we didn't intend it to be. So should we get to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to learn how to speak in the future, but for right now, let's just get to it.
Perfect. Hey, Gina, welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast.
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited and joined by my co-host, Ethan. Hey, Ethan.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Gina. Great to have you here.
Hello.
Yeah, so, Gina was, I think, probably my favorite speaker that we ever had at a Growth Hackers conference.
No way. You say that to everybody.
No, I really mean it with you. Yeah, you brought like incredible energy, and I know Ethan, that's where he met you as well. And so
I'm particularly hurt though that I wasn't your favorite speaker, Sean. But
I don't even remember you speaking. That's how bad you were. No, I'm just kidding.
It means a lot to me coming from you, Sean.
Yeah, no, it was. It always to me. It's just kind of zoom out for a second, because I know you've had conferences and things as well, and how much effort it is to try to have a gender balance of female and male speakers in tech because women are pretty underrepresented, and it is really common when I used to run conferences and got the reviews back that the top rated speakers were always women anyway. So it's like you think you're kind of doing something right, which is important still for the ecosystem, but at the same time, for anyone who's organizing conferences, like you actually are optimizing on success when you not only try to have gender balance, but when you just focus on great speakers.
To get to a point where you'd be recognized and invited to be a speaker, you probably have to try like a little harder than the average male in this day and age. So I think it does. That's one of the reasons why that happens. Not that we are naturally better, although we are.
I think it comes down to each person, and you as an individual are awesome. But
thank you. I appreciate it.
Great speaker.
I also remember, actually do remember you speaking in 2017, I think, at Growth Hackers, and it was a great talk. So, super excited to have you.
That makes me so happy. I live to entertain. Like, if I can entertain my team, like an audience, this makes me so happy. And so I think, a lot of what we're doing now, and we're going to get into it, and what we did at Duolingo was around this. Like, if you can grab someone's attention and keep it for a long time, you can achieve a lot.
Yeah. Well, this week, speaking of Duolingo, I'm going to hit my 450-day streak, and I am on my fourth language in those 450 days because I get bored, focus on a specific language, and then I move on because at least like I can freshen it up by focusing on a different language. And so, not that I can speak any of them particularly well. But
I was afraid to ask. Look, Duolingo doesn't promise to make you fluent in something, but it does get you over a lot of hurdles and in the door, and opens up opportunities that you may have not identified before. So as long as we can check some of those boxes.
Right. And for me, like when I just got back from Europe yesterday, and when I'm doing speaking, if I can have a few words and get the pronunciation right in a language, it's a great way to connect with an audience in a bunch of different countries.
Even if it's my bear drinks milk.
But I was in Lithuania, and I think there's a total of like 3 million people who speak Lithuanian. But of course, I have to learn how to say thank you, and just a few of those words.
That's on Duolingo?
No, that was ChatGPT. That was not one of the 4 languages on Duolingo. But it's a testament to the product that even when I get tired of learning a language, I still want to use the product, so I move on to a different language. So
that's very cool.
Yeah. So, but you have something new that is very exciting, and I can't wait to dig into it. I know we're not in a position where we can talk about everything yet, but I think the punchline here is that you just raised a $13 million seed round from Khosla Ventures, a VC that I'm particularly fond of from my days of when I first got to Silicon Valley. One of the partners there literally introduced me to everyone. David Wyden did, and later I served on a board with him. And so that's a great venture firm. I think Vinod Khosla is probably the biggest name in venture today still, and he's been a legend for a long time in it. So your company is Outstart. Is that Outsmart? Sorry.
It's Outsmart, but don't worry too much about it because we're gonna come up with a better name for it. It's just a interim name.
Yeah, but anyway, I think I'm so tied to startups that Outstart seemed like you were outstarting any other startups. So, what can you tell us about Outsmart and on a high level, and then we'll talk about still some of the things you think about, maybe without going too much into the details of how those specifically apply right now.
Sure. So, we're in stealth, which makes it super boring to talk about this because I can't say all the things that are in my head and I really want to say. But the story is that the former chief product officer at Duolingo, Jorge Mazal, approached me at Latitude and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of starting this company, and I would like you guys to invest." That's how that started, actually. So I was still at Latitude, doing the VC stuff in Latin America, and long story short, I ended up deciding that it was the right time, the right team, the right problem, the most exciting thing I could be working on, the most meaningful thing I could be working on. potentially for the next many years of my life. And I jumped and joined him. And so now we're currently three co-founders. The third one, Daniel Falabella, was leading a bunch of learning initiatives at Duolingo, also a product guy. And yeah, we raised the $13 million seed. It was led by Khosla, but it also includes Lightspeed, Latitude.
Wow.
So at the end of and Carmen Ventures and a bunch of amazing angels, Casey Winters and 20VC. So I'm really excited about the people that are going to be working alongside us. But I really think that at the end of the day, it was just a hack that Jorge had to get Latitude to invest. That's all he wanted, and he got it in the end. But then I came along for the ride.
Well, I mean, just between you and him, like that's a dream team in the education space. So I believe that I can say that. Otherwise, we'll go back and edit that out. But it's in the education space, right?
Yes, it's in the education space. I have a lot of what could be called imposter syndrome. So like when you say something like that, I'm like, oh, that's not really true. But I think that a lot of people believe that to be true. And that's how we raised this round.
Yeah.
I think Jorge believes that to be true. And on my better days, I believe that to be true too, that we are a dream team based on our experience. I was at Duolingo for the first 5 years, and then he followed suit for the subsequent 5 years. So we cover a lot of ground in terms of, just learning how things happen there. It is an education company, and our mission is to build what we think could be the future of college, starting with the United States and then hopefully internationally. But it's not innovative to say that college, the concept of college is outdated. It's been the same way for centuries. You go to there's still a lot of things you can do online, and those are innovative and they're great players in the space. But when you take a step back, most people are still applying for a 2 to 4 year program to go to a place to learn from someone older in the field in a diverse range of topics, and then you gain all these credits in this one place, and then you try to, get to the end of it, and then you have a degree.
Right.
And then that's some sort of validation. And then you look at the upper end of that, which is where, I think most people in tech are paying attention, which is the Ivy Leagues and the top schools. Their whole model is excluding as many people as possible because that's what makes them so special. But then, that means that there's a lot of people in the United States and beyond who could have a better solution that doesn't leave them highly indebted, that doesn't make it so that they graduate and then they're underemployed and can't pay off that debt. And also there's a large fraction of kids who either want to go to college, but they can't because whatever, they have kids, they have a job, their parents are ill, like it just doesn't fit their lives, or they don't want to, but maybe they would consider it if it was a little bit easier. And so those are some of the things that we think we can solve by creating a tech solution, drawing inspiration from solutions that exist and that are able to engage people in a way that hasn't been done before. And we think the time is really special because, naturally with AI, you can do a lot of things that you couldn't do before.
Right.
So when people say, oh, is this an AI startup? I don't want to be facetious. I think that I think Anthropic is an AI startup. I think that most other startups are today, if you're not applying AI in some way, then you're just opening up a huge door to be behind on day 2 of your startup. Like you need to apply, whether it be making it more efficient from an operations standpoint or in terms of efficiency and scale of your solution. And so that's how we're thinking about it.
So I want to get Ethan in here, but one really kind of critical question on the fundraising side is particularly on that size of a round. Obviously, you have this big vision and like it really feels like a strong, important mission. I'm curious how much the mission was something that attracted the investors, or did you have some indication already of some product market fit on the validation side, or are you able to talk about that at all?
It's hard. I was telling you guys, Sean and Ethan, it's so hard to talk about this because we're in stealth. And to be super fair, Jorge did most of the pitching, so I don't think I can even speak so intelligently about that anyway. I think it's a combination. I would say that definitely the latter plays a bigger role. Education is exciting from the point of view that there's a lot that can be built and there's huge TAM, especially when you're looking at college. But it's also a really tricky field because I would say I don't, I'm obviously biased, but I think the only huge success case in ed tech over the past maybe century is Duolingo.
Yeah,
There are other amazing players. Like I'm not here to say that like Sal Khan isn't like incredibly like a genius who changed the world. But just from a business standpoint, it's always been really hard to make it big in education. It's an area that has a lot of red tape, and so it's business side shies away from it. So I think it's not that attractive from one side, but from the other, just like in terms of like the possibility of what could be. And I think that there's a lot of excitement around what AI can do in the age of education right now. So it's a good time to be jumping into that. And then there's the mission aspect of it, which you mentioned, which is people want to be associated with something that is changing the world through education, through healthcare, and a couple of other things, which makes it easier if you have a huge vision to attract capital and to attract talent.
Yeah.
From a product market fit, I would say no. I think that like the problem that we've identified is a huge problem. It's not a vitamin kind of problem. It's definitely like a painkiller type problem, as VCs like to put it, and affects a large fraction of the global population. And there are concrete examples of things that have happened over the past 10 years that lead us to, I think, logically, intelligently believe that this team can build something of great value.
Right.
But do we have product market fit? No, we don't even, we barely have code.
Got it. Yeah. So I know, Ethan, I'm keeping you on the bench for just a second, but I do want to say on the mission side that after I had some really successful startups under my belt, I decided that, I really want to do things that are going to have a really positive impact in the world, and worked on split my time evenly between two education startups, and they were really hard. So I definitely know what you're talking about when you talk about the challenge there. And again, as I stated before, Duolingo is probably it's definitely the internet service that I spend the most kind of consistent time in, because every day starts with my Duolingo time. So you guys definitely cracked something there, and you're
a better person than me, because for me it's definitely Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, we'll see how long it lasts. But Ethan, I know you're chomping at the bit to ask a question here.
Well, I think you've touched on a lot of it. You briefly mentioned Latitude. You've mentioned Duolingo, but you do have this incredible backstory. I actually, as Sean mentioned, we met originally at the Growth Hackers Conference in 2017. I think was the one where I met you first. At that time, you were the VP of Marketing and Growth at Duolingo. Again, one of the most exciting growth stories ever. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey that got you from there to here? Some of the key roles you have, and maybe some of the pivots or things that sort of our audience needs to know to better understand Gina.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's worthwhile, because like Sean and I know each other, but your audience, I think, deserves a little bit of context.
Yeah.
Ethan, is it okay if I go back before Duolingo?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I have a very non-traditional background from I studied philosophy and neuroscience. I co-authored a neuroscience study. I don't know that much about neuroscience anymore. And ended up in digital media because that was literally the only job I could get, and why I wanted to live in New York. And the beginning of my career was a lot of flops. And then Tumblr hired me to launch and grow Tumblr in Brazil. And that, it wasn't out of nowhere, but it's one of those stories that doesn't follow a very linear path. And I had no budget. I had no team. I had no instructions. I just had the energy of a 26, 27-year-old who thinks that anything is possible, because you don't know what's impossible and you just go after things. And it worked. And I ended up being able to help Tumblr grow significantly in Latin America. And looking back, it was very much through a PR driven initiative. At the time, I didn't know it was PR. I was just I'm reaching out to journalists, and if they publish, it'd be great, And then, what else can we do? Oh, let's get the top publications in Latin America on Tumblr. Let's get the best comedians. Let's talk to the government and see if we can be part of their communication strategy, which we did in Argentina. Let's do a huge community thing. We did a thing for 1,200 teens, and they all showed up and were crying about how they had found their people. I didn't know then that I was going to get into any of this, to tech, to growth. This was just something I was doing, and it was really exciting, and I loved Tumblr. And after that, I was like, ooh, I'm in this place where I can do this for other tech companies. And so there were very exciting tech companies up and coming at the time, like 2011, 2012. And I was like, I can be this bridge for them to enter and grow in Latin America. And one of my first sort of clients, so to speak, was Duolingo. So they found me because the person they had hired as head of marketing in their very early days had worked with the person who had worked with me at Tumblr when they were at Flickr, because everyone knows everyone. Mm-hmm. And she was like, hey, like, Josh, you guys seem to have grown a lot in Brazil last year. Can you give me some tips? And he was like, talk to this girl. And that's how we got connected. And so I ended up doing some sort of consulting work for Duolingo, helping them launch and grow in Brazil. It went really well. So they asked me to do Chile, Argentina. Then they were like, oh, can you do Mexico? And I was like, yeah, I've never been to Mexico. Then they're like, can you do Russia, India, Japan, China, Korea, France, Germany, and take over global growth in the US? I was like, yeah, sure. And so that's how I ended up getting involved with them. And I ended up being employee number 20 there, very early days. So almost everyone was an engineer or a designer. And I was doing whatever needed to be done to make the thing grow, but without any budget. And so that was like convincing a lot of journalists to write about us. It was befriending people who led initiatives at app stores around the world so that they would think of us when they were doing like top apps features. It was thinking about SEO and ASO, and then government partnerships, and I don't know, just really like a variety of things. A lot of brand, a lot of communications. And then eventually they asked me to lead the growth team, which wasn't a team. It was just me and a back-end engineer who and that was all we had. And they were like, okay, if you can prove yourselves, we'll give you more resources. And like the first thing we did was like notifications, because we didn't have a designer, so all we could do was code and write. And the badge, the red badge that you see on your app, and you want to like click it away because it feels like you need to, the red thing, the dot, we implemented that. And then we made a big list of what we thought would have a lot of impact, mostly like crowdsourced from the company and from the founders. Like many of these ideas weren't ours, but we prioritized them. And then the team started growing and we started running them. And that's how I was head of growth. I was also part of the executive team at Duolingo, which was an incredible ride because so much evolved over time, and we raised rounds and we pivoted the business model, and we scaled the company. And so it was really a fantastic ride. A lot less perfect than you would imagine. Like both Tumblr and Duolingo, just a lot of it looks like a duck on the surface of the water, like smooth sailing, but then you look at the legs and it's like that's like what a startup is like, you both know. And so that was definitely the case for a long time. I left Duolingo in 2018. And then long story short, ended up working on the Mike Bloomberg presidential campaign. And there, the growth work I did was super cool because we had $1 million a day in budget. And so I was doing A/B testing on our landing pages, and I had never had statistical significance 3 times in a day before. It was like you normally had to wait like 2 weeks, So being able to see like a conversion rate go from 3 to 12% in one day was very exciting for nerdy growth Gina. But of course, it wasn't a successful endeavor because he didn't win, but I learned a lot. And then I started this VC firm and community, kind of like a YC for Latin America. So YC doesn't really invest in Latin American startups, understandably. So they started to, but then this year they invested in one, or last year they invested in one, which was actually a company Latitude had invested in before. And so we wanted to make it a lot easier for startups in Latin America to grow as big as Nubank and to succeed at a global scale. We think the time is right. Latitude's doing well. They just raised their second fund. And then that's it. I'm here. I'm doing this other thing.
So I just want to follow up on one thing you said. You talked about the story when it was just, you're tasked with starting a growth team. It's just you and another engineer, and you have no resources until you prove it. It sounds like your career has been filled with sort of the opposite ends of that. Either you have a lot of resources and the sky's the limit, or you have none. And it's like, you just figure it out. I guess 2 questions that go with that is, with your new venture, where do you see yourself? I mean, obviously you raised some money, so that gives you some power to use to grow resources, but where do you see it? And like, are you excited about are you more excited about having limits, or more excited about having the open oyster world?
That's such a good question. And I haven't thought about it. I would say we're in a weird place in between. So I come I tend to be very what's the word? Like I want to work with very few resources. That's my niche in growth. Like I have proven that I can over and over find kind of creative, scrappy ways to make something grow without a lot of budget, and I like that. I think that like having that constraint allows me to shine in this other place, and it doesn't give me the responsibility of having to like look over a huge budget. But of course, having money makes it so that we can accomplish so much more. I still have this very scrappy mentality because we are a seed startup, and even though we raised a $13 million round, for me, like that's an amazing cushion that we have for our strategy. But I want to operate as if we didn't. But it's very hard because we do, and I saw that happen with Latitude too, and so many startups. So this is a conversation I have with my co-founders on a regular basis. There are daily decisions you need to make where like you could save some money, or you could just say, well, in the grand scheme of things of our 10-year company with our, the money that we have, it doesn't really mean anything. But then you could be like, yeah, but that's making us take the lazy option, which can, have horrible consequences, which I've seen as well. So I struggle I think is the answer to that. I think, to be honest, deep inside, I would prefer it if we didn't have as much money. I would prefer having to make do with less because I like that. But of course, it's a huge privilege to have a budget. And to me, the most exciting part about having a budget is that we can hire the best talent in the world. And like that's one of the main reasons why I'm doing this. Like I want to work with the best talent in the world. It's so fun. Like and we need to afford them.
So now I'm not going to let Sean speak, but it's funny you say that though, because hiring the best talent in the world, I think it's still at an early stage. It comes back to what you were saying. I think the scrappiness is sort of is the key. It's you want to hire the best scrappy talent that's out there.
Yes.
And I remember distinctly when I started working with Sean, this is a long time ago at uproar.com. Every time we were hiring somebody, we were always like, I remember that was the word we would use. We were looking through the lens of scrappiness. Like is this person scrappy enough for what we're trying to accomplish? And we actually did have, some resources at the time. We weren't super limited, but I think that was something that we always valued. We said, we want people who are going to really dig deep and figure out ways to do a lot with a little. And I think it was, it helped. It really helped us figure out how to get from point A to point B. But so thank you. That's great.
Totally. But it's so hard. Like imagine, you're a kid, you have rich parents, and your mom wants to raise you right, and she goes like, you're going to walk to school. And then one day you're late to school, and you're like, can I just take our Rolls Royce? Can I just ride in the, in the Ferrari? And then like at one point it's like, okay, fine, you can today. And then you can a week later. And then where do you draw the line?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it feels to have money in the bank. So I don't know. When we first raised, I was like, oh my God, amazing. On the other hand, like, I really hope that we're able to be as responsible as we think we can be.
Sounds like you've been reading Ethan's bio with his Rolls Royce rides to school.
Yeah, thanks. Now I'm triggered.
Sorry. I guess.
Kidding. So obviously Duolingo is the piece that maps to what you're doing now. I mean, the fact that you and your co-founder both come from Duolingo. What do you think are some of two of them? Okay, so both co-founders besides you came from Duolingo as well. Wow. So what do you think are some of the, particularly, I'm trying to figure out the best way to sort of articulate this question, but I've already asked you about product market fit, and you indicated that it's early still. You're going through that process. You're very early in the process of validating. But that if we take common sort of wisdom on how you approach product market fit, that you don't want to be aggressive about growth until you have some indication of product market fit. And if you aggressively try to scale without product market fit, that's the fastest way to burn through a lot of that money that you raised. And so, but I think when you look at Duolingo, it's really interesting because, like engagement would be a growth metric, but it's also a product market fit metric. And so much of, I think, what makes Duolingo work in the education space is that it keeps people interested in the learning process. And so I'm curious, like, are there some growth levers that are important at this stage? And when you look at Duolingo, what can you take from the learning at Duolingo that perhaps others can also think about in trying to get product market fit with their businesses?
Yeah, I think engagement, and then as a proxy or as a tactic for retention, is the most important thing. If people are coming back, that means that you have something of value, right? It's like that simple. And if people keep coming back, it's really hard to do that. So people throw a lot of money at, like, okay, well, we'll just get new users and then we'll test new things and then we'll A/B test. Like, you can't A/B test before you have product market fit. You can't A/B test before you have like a core number of users. So we're just, I'm hoping, we are all hopeful that we learned a lot about how to do that. And we're going to apply a lot of those tactics and strategies to what we're building today. And there are great education edtech products out there which could have gone a lot further if they had cracked that engagement and retention nut. And so many people want to sign up for things because they want education, but then you don't really want to come back and study every day. Like, you want to go to the gym, but you don't want to go to the gym every day. You want to have gone to the gym. You want to have gone to university. You don't want to go and do it. And so, like, that's key. And so I think that's top of mind for us, and it has to do with product, and it has to do also with our audience. It has to do with how we talk to our audience, and all of those things. I think our core are really well understood at Duolingo at this point. So I was there in the early days of growth. I believe I unfortunately got there after product market fit. I think fortunately for me, which allowed me to grow the thing. Like you said, you can't really grow something that doesn't have product market fit. Yeah. But I think one thing that we can do differently this time around is maybe find a way to engage potential users a little bit more earlier on. So that is a little peek into what we could do in order to start learning before we have anything close to product market fit, because we have very few lines of code and design right now. Like, we're very far from having, very far. Like, we're maybe 6 months away. From something. I don't know. It might be something that we're ready to show into like a larger audience, or it's going to be a private audience or something like that. So you normally don't have a CMO who is a co-founder. Right. I would say, like, I'm not gonna invest in a company that has a CMO as a co-founder. Like, you don't need a CMO at that level. Yeah. So I need, my mandate is to learn a lot about our audience and to figure out how to communicate with them really effectively early, so that by the time that we are approaching product market fit, I can then put the foot on the gas pedal.
So one thing I want to, sorry, I know Ethan, you're about to jump, but one thing I want to, I don't know if challenge you is the right word, but at least get your thoughts on with Duolingo is I feel like having tried it in the earlier days when you were there, and as I'm mentioning, like, now I'm like pretty much addicted to it. I feel like the product market fit has only strengthened over the years with Duolingo, and I'm just curious about your opinion on that. Do you feel like once you have product market fit, it can keep getting better, and is that important for a business?
Absolutely. I mean, yes. So Duolingo cracked like the product market fit because it was a free thing. That was, and there was almost no real. Like, there was very few competitors. Well, we had like Babbel and Boozoo like very early on, and of course like Rosetta Stone. I don't know if that really counts, but it was very early on. It was free. It was bite-sized, and once we were able to figure out that people were willing to try that out because it was free and it was there and it was probably better than a lot of what they had, that quickly becomes not enough. And then you need to be able to cater to people who are asking questions about, like, how far can I get with my language education? So then, like, that's kind of like a different audience. And then by the time I left, Gen Z became extremely important for Duolingo, and I wasn't thinking that much about Gen Z when I was there because they were kids, and so like that you have to in a way, like, I think once you find product market fit, it's not like you could lose it, but you have to keep iterating on it because your audience is evolving, because the needs of the audience are evolving, because the world is changing and what's expected of you is evolving.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what's most fascinating about tech products and why I love working in this space. It's that as a growth person, as a marketer, you don't get given a thing and then try to sell that thing. It's just a constant evolution every day. You have to take input from your users, be it in terms of like A/B testing or observing or whatever, and your understanding of the world and understanding of what exists, like be it games, and apply it and consistently change the product like little bit by little bit, so that every day and every week and every month and every year it's a little bit different, so that it rides the wave with changes that are happening in the world.
I love that. Awesome.
Yeah. So with that, you mentioned that right now you don't have an audience. You don't have, like, you're really in learning mode. And as you said, normally you wouldn't hire a CMO this early in the process. So with that mandate that you have to learn the audience, I think for our audience, like a lot of people struggle with this early on. What's your approach right now? Like, what do you do to get out there right now to try to figure this out before you have those tools in front of you, like a product to go throw at them?
Yeah, it's a new challenge for me. And I think, Ethan, when you were saying like, oh, your career seems like a lot of, I thought you were going to say like moments where you were like completely inept and not qualified to do things. And then you had to throw yourself into it and figure it out, this has been my career. And
I guess you've listened to the podcast and you see how I treat guests normally.
That's how I feel. It's like, again, like, oh my gosh, like, so I, at Duolingo, like there was product market fit, and then I had to like find out how to get it to a lot of people. Then, jump to like Latitude, and it was like this tiny little thing. We had to make this incredible hype around it so that it like surfaced as one of the top VC funds in the region in a very short amount of time. Now I have no product, and I have to make nothing grow, and it's so interesting. So I'm in investigative mode. I think it's not, I hope, my co-founders don't get mad at me for saying that, like, it's obvious that in this day and age, if you're trying to grow organically, which is why I'm here, like, I'm an expensive person to be, here at this point in the company, but it's because of my organic growth trajectory and hoping that we can achieve that again. Because if we're able to keep marginal costs super low and we don't have to fight the CAC LTV wars, we have an incredible advantage in the long run. And so that's what we're trying to crack. And social media is, of course, a huge part of that. And so understanding what that means and who our audience is, and what we need to do over the next 12 months and how is what I'm focusing on. My embarrassing teaser is that I think I'm going to try to become an influencer over the next few months. And I'm like, it's so cringe to say that out loud. I think that like over like the past 10 years, secretly I wanted to, but I also like judged hardcore the people who were doing that and were like, I'm an influencer, look at me. And then like, this is what I eat for breakfast or whatever, or this is my little dance on TikTok. But they're geniuses, because we all know that audiences are so valuable, and that value only compounds over time. And I think I have things to say, but I have to find like the format and figure out if it's interesting to this audience and in a way that makes sense for our startup. So I think that's it's not the only thing I'm doing, but that's one of the things I'm getting ready to do. But I'm so scared that like I spend all my time researching and taking notes about what I should do, and I'm unable to actually like record a serious video.
But I think it's like the idea of being an influencer. The thing about influencers is they have great feedback loops to work from. So I think it's like that is a really solid approach. Even if you don't become a giant influencer, what you may find is that you get a lot of feedback that's super valuable. I remember when we originally launched RoboKiller, we did a Kickstarter campaign after we won this FTC contest. We had no intention of raising money through the Kickstarter. It'd be nice if we did. I think we set it like $125,000, and we did get it to like $60,000, $70,000. But the point of it was to build an audience that we could talk to, and that was so super effective. So I think it's really like, even if it's like being an influencer is the hack to get the learnings. It's that's super. It could be super effective. So that's cool.
Yeah, I feel like I'm opening a portal in the world to Gen Z. Like I'm looking at myself in the mirror. You guys know how it is. We age, and then it's like ridiculously, this is how I feel, okay? If you look in the mirror and you're like, I'm still young Gina. Like, everything's the same. I'm so cool. And like, I'm the same person. And like, I just have all this like experience now, but I'm the same person. And then you talk to someone who's actually young and they look at you like you're an aunt, like you're a has-been. And I remember being that age and seeing someone, I'm 38, and seeing someone who's almost 40, and like how I felt about that person and how old that was, and how like completely out of touch. And I don't have kids, and I don't have nieces and nephews. I don't have access to Gen Z other than, and like, not to get political, but I'm Jewish, and like the campus stuff that's been happening in the United States is crazy. So like, that's my interaction with Gen Z right now. And like, I would like it to be a lot more deep and a lot more broad. I've met incredible people who are Gen Z, of course. Like, it's not like I don't go out of my house, but I think that like, by doing this, I could potentially create a really cool portal that connects me or us with great Gen Z, and I think that there could be an amazing exchange that happens at scale that way.
Yeah, and then ultimately, I think the negativity around influencer is just the people who are sort of not bringing anything besides like just attention-seeking stuff out there, but influence is also
it's embarrassing.
Yeah, but influence can be used because you're providing something of huge value to people, and you can't get them to take action on it or pay attention to it without having some influence. And so I think it's just what the word has become instead of kind of what the real core meaning is.
And if I want to be more practical, and less self-defeating, I could also say, like, look, I get a lot of requests for advisory, a lot of messages being like, hey, Gina, going to have 30 minutes, an hour of your time, and like whatnot. I think if I can do that on social media, then it's at scale, and I can reach a much larger audience.
Absolutely. So, again, like, I think if we keep coming back to the theme of Duolingo, because it is such an incredible company, and it's related to what you're doing now. That's kind of a hot topic right now. I think Ethan was telling me that Andrew Chen recently said their investment fund is looking for the Duolingo of ... of a bunch of different categories. And so, do you think it's a good thing for you or a bad thing that everyone wants to fund or be the next Duolingo of something?
I don't know, Sean. I think from like a practical perspective, it's neither good nor bad. Well, look, in terms of like our fundraising and getting traction and hiring, I think the more credit Duolingo gets and the more hype Duolingo gets and the more that is used, the better for us, because it's, it benefits us because we were there. So that's positive. I don't see it as negative in any way, other than like from a personal perspective. Like, I feel sad because I miss being there, and so like there's a piece of me that's like that has that. But I think it's a positive thing. What I take from it is that when we started at Duolingo, and I say that loosely, I was employee number 20. When we started Duolingo, most people would balk at the idea that you could actually learn a language on a gamified app that had like a silly looking owl as its avatar, 5 minutes a day. It just sounded really ridiculous, and there was a lot of eye rolling going around. And I think that with the growth of Duolingo and proving that this, that this can actually help people in a huge way, and at scale, people started really understanding what's possible through the phone that we have in our pockets, and what other huge aspects of society can be made accessible to a much larger piece of the population, not just because it's free or cheap, but because it's in bite-sized pieces, because it's quote-unquote gamified, which just means like it actually understands that you need to keep people engaged and motivated to accomplish long-term goals. I think that's positive because it really enables a lot more people to solve a lot more problems in this new method.
Yeah, I was actually just teaching a workshop in Lithuania a couple of days ago, and one of the people made the comment that I brought up the book Hooked by Muriel, and someone made the comment that that's it's creating these addictive apps and services out there, and it's such a negative thing. And I didn't specifically call out Duolingo. I think I called out Noom, but I said these these tools can be used for good or can be used for negative things. But when you apply it to like healthier living, like Noom is doing, but in the case of Duolingo, to education, that being able to understand how you build habits is a good thing. And so I do think that's something that really Duolingo has pioneered, and that hopefully you can now apply in a broader education format.
Exactly.
I know we're going to run out of time too early today, but
all for booking something on the back of this. Sorry, guys.
No worries. But Gina, so I guess it was 6-7 weeks ago, you and I reconnected at Revenue Cat held this great conference. You spoke there. You're really talking about everything from landing page optimization, but it was another great presentation. And one of the things that came up, you briefly mentioned it was PR, and then you brought up PR earlier today. And I remember when we were at that conference, you and I were chatting with some founder, and both of us were all of a sudden we were like in an advising session around PR because you and I are both really passionate about it. Do you, especially with a product that you're there to grow it organically, and obviously you've had success with PR in the past, do you feel like this is going to be another important channel for you to harness as you go forward? And for founders, where should they start with a channel like that from your perspective?
I love PR. I wouldn't have sex with it, but I love PR.
That was
but
I'm never going to live that one down.
I do love it. I think, I like I said in the conference, and I say it often, is I think it's super underrated. PR is so uncool, and it's like so non-growthy, and it's not product led. And like when you think PR, at least me, like I think of like ladies, like PR ladies who like write press releases and go to like these newsrooms and like try to convince these people to like write a story about this thing. But it's so not that. When I think of PR, I've always thought of it as like, how can I access the largest retentive audiences for free in a way that is win-win-win for everybody? And they're all out there. There's so many journalists and editors and bloggers and influencers and people with audiences who are just looking for great content, and they know what kind of content their audience is going to like, and their audience is looking for great content too. So you have great content. You just have to package it in a way that's actually great content, because you can't just show up and be like, I'm selling these glasses. Like, can you write a story about how like these glasses are really cool and I just like sold my first pair? Like, that's not interesting. So you have to understand what's really interesting to that audience, and then take a step back and think of what's really interesting to that journalist or to that editor. Like, because everyone's a person. So then you look up and you find like, oh, Ethan likes to write things about, I don't know, like the environment. So I'm going to give it an environment sort of like twist, and maybe Ethan's going to be more interested. So understanding how to connect with these audiences and to pitch stories that can then reach large amounts of people, I think is an amazing hack. And people ask me all the time, like, well, Gina, like that was 2012, 13, things have changed. No, they haven't, Kevin. I think PR has always been important, and it will always be important if you think about it from that perspective, because there will always be information consumers and information producers, and it can be in video format or in newspaper format or online or offline, whatever. But like, if you're able to hack that, I think it's a way to not have to spend a huge amount of money on a billboard.
Hey, Ethan, let me give you kudos before you jump in with another question. So Ethan's been my PR guru for like the last 25 years. And interestingly, through that time, he's constantly saying, do not position me as a PR guy. he's been running away from that.
It's like really not sexy to be the PR person.
Yeah, it seems very fluffy or something. But he really built a great, successful company off the back of PR with RoboKiller, and to see how much you had done. That was what your presentation was at the Growth Hackers conference on the power that PR brought to Duolingo. So clearly it is a very powerful approach to growth.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that, one thing that you said, Gina, that resonates with me is PR is about selling to and through an audience. It's not, like you said, it's not just about telling a great story. It's telling a great story that a journalist wants to tell their audience. And they're thinking about, like, we used to joke, it's like they're thinking about how many likes they're going to get on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
So when
it's not a joke.
When you start thinking about, how to approach PR, to me, it's always about thinking, through that journalist as the conduit to an audience, but thinking about like what's interesting for them, what's a story that's interesting for them to tell, because it's going to make them look good. Like it, so it's
100%.
It's complex in that sense. And I appreciate that, you've really embraced and leaned into that over time, because I think it is super valuable. But the reason I shy away from it is because I think too much of it is just about like, hey, we're great, right? Like, and it's like, no, you can't just say you're great. You've got to show the why.
No. So, yeah. And I agree with everything you said. And I would add one last piece, which is like thinking through, okay, and then how is that story going to impact your business? And what's the impact you want? Because like, for example, I want to grow. So let's get a story out about how I raised like $13 million on TechCrunch. That's not going to grow anything. Like that's not my audience. And it doesn't tell a story that's going to, it doesn't grow my ego and my following or whatever, but like, it's not exactly. So I think that's a really core piece as well.
Yeah, so we're really tight on time here. So unfortunately, again, my fault for booking something on the back of this. But two things. One, are you hiring for any roles right now? Just because I think you have such an exciting mission that there's probably a lot of our listeners that would love to be a part of it. So we'll start with that.
Yes. Of course, we are hiring. We have a lot of shoes to fill. Most importantly, is we're hiring iOS engineers, like top iOS engineers. But honestly, if you're a software engineer and you've worked at one of the top tech companies in the world and you're interested, please contact us. Mm-hmm. We're also hiring our first designers. Same thing. And then those are probably the most important roles.
Okay. And how should they reach out to you through LinkedIn?
Right. Yes. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. So Gina Gotthilf. I have a photo with Obama. Send me a message.
We'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Thanks.
And then,
well, my other flex is that I'm at Gina on Instagram, so you can also reach out to me there.
And then I assume you're not even on X anymore.
X, I'm on X. Okay. The cesspool is. I think you have to be on X. I'm Gina G on there. Right. But yeah, so wherever you want to reach out to me, you can.
I'm thinking about running away from X myself, but different story. And then the last question that we love to end with, is there anything that you feel like you understand about growth today that you did not understand a few years ago?
Such a hard question for we don't have any more minutes left.
Unless you say no, and then it's really easy.
No.
There you go.
We don't have time for this.
Okay, perfect.
You know what? We'll follow up and we can put it in the show notes.
Again, show notes. But thank you, Gina, so much for taking the time. I know it's not the growth story yet that we would typically cover, but I think the potential is so strong here. And obviously, we talked a lot about Duolingo and the incredible success that you and other founders at your company had there, and I'm really excited to see how you guys apply it to more broadly addressing the challenges in education that we all see out there. So it'll be exciting to see where you go from there. And for everyone tuning in, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And Gina, you'll definitely be a 2-time guest on the podcast. So thanks.
I really hope I can come back in 4 years and have great hacks to share with you guys.
Perfect.
Thanks for listening to the Breakout Growth Podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss a show. Until next week.